I'm the founder and CEO of Prep Expert. So we're an online test preparation company, and we help students improve their test scores, get into colleges, and win scholarships.
Hmm. Interesting business model, man. How'd you get into it?
So I never thought I was going to be in test prep. Really, what happened was it was out of my own experience. What I mean by that is, I was not a very good standardized test taker in high school. Got an average SAT score the very first time I took it, had a lot of test anxiety. I then spent hundreds of hours in the library studying for the SAT, was able to raise my score from average to perfect, completely changed my life, got into some of the top universities, got a $500,000 in college scholarships. And so when I got to college, I wanted to help other students improve their test scores to improve their own lives. And so I started Prep Expert. And in the very first course I ever taught, my students had a 376 point average SAT score improvement. This was
Hmm.
equivalent to taking a student from the 50th percentile to the 90th percentile. And, then parents and students wanted more courses. I began training other instructors to teach my curriculum, and now we've helped over 100,000 students.
Wow. Nice, man. 100,000 is no chump change number, dude. That's what I'm talking about. You went from average to perfect. Literally perfect, perfect.
Yeah, I didn't miss one question. It's
Wow.
something
How,
that only
man?
0.02% of all students achieve. Yeah.
How'd you do it? It's a fascinating accomplishment.
A lot of hours, a lot of studying, a lot of applying techniques and strategies that I learned taking over 20 practice exams the summer between my 11th and 12th grade year. And that's really what I try to package and streamline into our courses, our tutoring, and our books for students.
What about the memory of it? Because you've got to memorize a shit ton of different information to be able to pull something like that off. So, what's your memory technique? How do you remember these things?
Yeah, so for example, to memorize obscure vocabulary, what I typically do is I repeat the word 7 times because there's a lot of research that shows that if you see something 7 times, you often remember it. But then I take it one step further and I try to see it in 7 different contexts or perspectives
Hmm,
to see different angles. And so it seems to work for me and will work for my students.
no kidding. And what about any other? How do you think, first of all? Do you think visually? How do you experience reality?
So I'd say I'm fairly logical, so I kind of go A to B. I wouldn't say I think visually. That's probably more one of my weaknesses.
Really? How do you think then? Logically, yes, but what about modality wise? Is there a voice? Is there a feeling? What is it with you?
Yeah, it's primarily I kind of hear my own mind kind of working or voice, if you want to call it that. Um, that's kind of I would say how I think about things. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it answers it, man. It's interesting. I want to explore your mind a little bit because you've got a fascinating one. Something that 0.02% of people have been able to accomplish. So, I mean, especially coming from the average score. So you were able to make a shift there that changed everything. What about the memory techniques that you teach people in your course 100,000 students later? How do you tell them to memorize facts in a way that's going to be able to be brought back up in test time?
Yeah, so we teach that 7 time repetition method as well as the 7 perspectives method. Those are a couple of the ones that I had mentioned earlier. But really, it's all about, figuring out how to work with time management, delay gratification, work hard, study effectively. So we teach all of these techniques that aren't just helpful for the SAT, but they're helpful for all of students' education, academics, as well as even in their own lives if they want to become entrepreneurs. You have to be able to manage your time, work hard, etc.
Hmm. Okay, so it's just the seven contexts and the seven repetitions. That's the only memory technique that you utilize and teach?
Yeah, we don't teach as much memory as we do practice of application of strategies because memorization is kind of, I would say, one of the not as important aspects of learning for tests because you're never going to see the same question. So you have to be able to apply the techniques and strategies to different question types. So yeah, we don't teach a whole lot of memory other than that. Yeah.
So the strategy of understanding the context of the question and be able to kind of elaborate on the answer based on the actual question itself. If you're not memorizing the info that's going into the question answering, then what is it? What's the strategy to be able to answer a question that you haven't memorized the answer to? Because from my point of view, testing in school, I was horrible at it. I hated it because it's a very memory intensive task for me. And it's, anyways, that's my impression of it. And so I was always a creative one. So I wanted to create answers. I could find a way to make an answer that appeared false very true and be able to kind of frame it in a way that it was truer than the actual truth, the answer that they wanted in the question, in the test. So that's what I'm wondering is how do you strategize? How do you teach that strategy so that people can find an answer when they haven't memorized the content?
Yeah, so we teach different techniques, such as like coming up with your own solution prior to looking at the answer choices and then matching the best one. So that's one technique, but it's never going to be something that you memorize because it's something that you just have to practice on various questions over time. Um, and I find that that makes for better learning and more effective learning. Yeah.
Let's get into that a little bit. Something that's applicable to an entrepreneur watching is the ability to learn, the ability to learn in general, not necessarily for tests, but to comprehend and understand the world in a way that you weren't able to before understanding something. And so, what about the experience of that? How do you tell people to get started in that context?
Yeah, so in that case, what I typically do is um, when you're an entrepreneur, I think it's really important that you learn from multiple perspectives again, kind of going back to that seven perspectives method. So like what I mean by that is if I'm launching a new product or service, I won't just read about it in the book on how to do the launch. I'll listen to audiobooks, I'll read a book, I'll watch a YouTube video. So I think learning from different perspectives, different teachers, and different modalities really helps.
In different modalities. So, elaborate on that for me. What do you mean exactly when you say modalities?
Yeah, so what I just said was audio, visual, reading, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, so the context of the question, it actually just goes back to being able I mean, like, what about learning something in general? How would you recommend? I get it. You're looking at it from different perspectives. What about taking things from seven different industries and seeing how what you're doing would apply in seven different industries as a perspective shift? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great application. I would say that some of my best products or services that I've launched at my company over time have been when I learned from what someone was doing in a different industry and
Hmm.
then applied it to my own. So yeah, I do think that can work quite well.
Give me an example. What did you take from a different industry that worked for you?
So I was watching a webinar from a marketing person on SEO, and he was going through the whole webinar and doing the pitch at the end. And I thought it was a really effective way to communicate value proposition. And so I then applied that to my own business. I started having webinars where I taught parents and students some of our techniques and strategies, and then gave a pitch for our courses and services, and that worked quite well.
Hmm. What about the traffic? How'd you get people to the webinar?
Typically, we use Facebook ads. We find that that's the most effective way to drive webinar registrations.
Really? I mean, you've got an interesting target audience because a lot of students don't have the money to be investing in a service like that. Do you target the higher end, the higher echelon of students, or do you find that, people are going to university, they're going to have some sort of student loan or some way of investing in the webinar at the end of the day?
Oh, we don't target the students. We target the parents because
Ah,
these
got you. Okay, okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Right. Mm. So, what's the difference in terms of targeting? Because that's an interesting problem because your target audience is the student. I mean, that's who you're helping, but it's not the decision maker that you're actually marketing to. So, what's the difference that you've noticed? Have you ever marketed to the student to find out that the parent was the better one to market to?
No, it's pretty standard practice in our industry because we're dealing with high school students who don't even have credit cards.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to target the student.
So there's no existing university students in your programs. It's only high school kids that are taking their SAT scores to get into university.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. And 100,000 of them, man. That's a lot of Facebook ads. And it was mostly through webinars.
No, no. I mean, I would, most of it is just word of mouth, and I was on Shark Tank, which was a big thing that drove a ton of leads our way.
Right. What happened on Shark Tank?
So I pitched Prep Expert, that's my company, for an investment deal for test preparation, and I ended up closing an investment deal with Mark Cuban, and it's been an amazing partnership ever since. But the exposure from Shark Tank really got me in front of 10 million people
Hmm.
for free, which was nice.
How has working with Mark been? I got an email from him a couple weeks ago, which was interesting. I'm using AI to outreach and see who it can get replies from. And Mark replied to one of the AI emails. So
Oh, cool.
it is cool, man. Very cool. What's your experience been like working with him?
It's been amazing. Yeah, and like you said, he mainly operates on email. I think he does like 800 emails a day. But he's always helpful for advice. You get access to the whole Mark Cuban company's team. I
Hmm.
was just with him at an event a couple of weeks ago that we did for entrepreneurs. So it's been pretty incredible.
What about applying the pitch tactics when it came to the Shark Tank pitch as opposed to the webinar? What are some similarities and differences in the two pitches?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the Shark Tank pitch, you really have to know your numbers more than anything else. I had to know my sales numbers, my cost per acquisition. They're really looking at it from a business or investment perspective. In terms of similarities to the webinar, I think it might be you really have to know your numbers in terms of like your average score improvements
Hmm.
and testimonials and things like that to show your customer. But I wouldn't say they're all that similar other than, just know your stuff and be prepared.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay. So, I mean, what's interesting though is you got Facebook ads to work with webinars, which is difficult. I've been in touch with world-class webinar presenters who have a hard time monetizing Facebook ads. And so
Interesting.
it is interesting, man. So what was your experience with that in terms of when you were starting out with the Facebook ads? Were you instantly profitable? Is it just a valuable niche that you happen to choose? I mean, what's been the secret to the profitability there?
Yeah, I mean, I've started doing webinars in 2016, so I think that we were instantly profitable because Facebook ads back then were a lot cheaper.
Mm,
Uh, so it was a lot easier. I would say in 2024, it's definitely more expensive to advertise on Facebook and a lot harder. I think one of the things that benefits me is because I'm, targeting a older audience. So like, parents with teenage students that are 16, 17 years old, they do tend to use Facebook quite a lot. Whereas like,
mm.
if you're targeting a younger audience, there's not as much use. And maybe they're on Instagram, but they're definitely not on Facebook.
Have you tested different platforms for this audience? Like, still, it's difficult to become profitable, especially you do live webinars, right? Not evergreen, kind of in front of people to the same recorded webinar. They're always live.
I do both, yeah, and both are profitable, yeah.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that people need to fix is their offer. Make sure you have a really good offer. So what I do is I have an expiring discount that literally you can only, especially on the live webinars, you can only get on the live webinar. And if they don't take advantage of it that day, they're out of luck. Yeah.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources. And you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast. So, what has been the number one contribution in terms of monetizing and profitably monetizing the Facebook ads? Well, if you were to attribute it to anything, would it be the offer? I mean, what about the targeting on the ads themselves?
I wouldn't say it's the targeting or the offer. I'd say the number one thing that you have to have is you have to have a really good webinar. Meaning, like, I give away my best secrets to college admissions, my best secrets to scholarships, my best secrets to test prep right away for free on the webinar. And that's really to establish trust and authority so that, people are ready to buy because they're like, their minds are blown basically. And that's what you got to do because a lot of people try to hold back their
Yeah.
value. And if you're holding back your value, people are going to see right through you. And so I would just give away your best stuff and then, make your offer and usually that works quite well.
It's interesting. I agree with that, man. But a lot of people don't. For example, Russell Brunson talks about, doing the bare minimum in the webinar. Essentially, it's like explaining the what, but never explaining the how of it. So there's not really much value there in terms of the webinar itself. You got to buy the course or whatever he's selling at the end to get the value. But I love your way better, man. How did you? Who was the one that introduced you to that concept, or how did you get the idea?
Honestly, I learned about Russell Brunson and all the webinar people later. I just did it on my own. And
Hmm.
the reason that I think it works well for me is like, um, I have so much content. Like my course is literally 80 hours. Like there's no way I could teach if I teach you 1 hour of stuff in the webinar or 90 minutes of stuff, like there's no way, even if I teach you my best stuff, I've got way more stuff coming in the actual course. So it's literally, I wouldn't even be able to, there's nothing to hold back because unless you want to spend
Hmm.
90 hours with me. Yeah.
What about the choosing of what to offer in the webinar? How did you know what content to use if you got 90 hours of it?
I've just been doing this for 12 years, so I kind of know what our most popular strategies are, what really resonates with students and parents, and
Hmm.
so it's kind of just user testing over time, basically. The content has changed as I get more feedback, as I've taught courses, etc.
Walk me through the testing process. Let's say you were to launch a new product with a new webinar, new ads. Where would you start in developing let's say you've got the product, doesn't matter what it is. Where would you start in terms of marketing it?
Well, I would probably first take a survey of like what topics are you interested in learning about with my email audience or my SMS audience. And just send out a survey like, hey, we're thinking about putting on a free master class. Which one would you be interested in? And that, I mean, you got to test and survey. That would be my main thing.
Yeah, that's some good insight. Okay. So what next?
Once I figured out the topic, then I would, put together a presentation. But the presentation, I mean, is no joke. Like I think this new presentation I did, it took me maybe 200 hours to put together. So I mean, but was a one-time thing, and then I used the same presentation for years. So I think it's effort, but that's the hard part. That's the part that no one wants to do is put together like an amazing presentation that will blow people's minds. So that would be the hard part. And then obviously from there, I would build out the landing pages, the uh, the ads and all that based on what's in the presentation. But uh, yeah, I think that part of people skip over is like building the actual content.
Hmm. What about the hook? How do you develop a hook for the ad, for the landing page, for the webinar itself? What about because that comes down to the testing process, obviously, but how do you know what hooks will work? And what have you learned over time in terms of capturing attention in general?
I mean, I always just focus on one question, which is what's in it for them. So if I know what's in it for them, my latest webinar that I just launched, it's called Seven Strategies for Parents to Help Your Child Earn $100,000 college scholarships and ace the new digital SAT. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
Tells you exactly what's in it for you and why you should attend.
What about leaning into pain points? You're on the positive end of things. What about leveraging the other side?
Yeah, I know that a lot of marketers teach that. I mean, I'm sure it works, but like I said, I learn about all the other marketers later, so I just kind of do with what works for me.
How'd you develop a webinar framework without learning from somebody else that's mastered it? I mean, it's not an easy thing to put together a sales webinar that converts. How'd you do that?
Yeah, to be honest, like I said, I guess the only thing I learned from was seeing the other marketing guy do it, and I just modeled it after that. So it's not like I developed it, completely on my own, but it wasn't like someone taught me like, oh, do the pain points, do the pitch. I just saw someone else give a webinar and I was like, I should do that. And I just did it.
And it worked right away.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, what's the price point that you were selling at back then and now?
So our course back then was $700, but now what I do is instead of selling one course, I'll sell them unlimited access to all of our courses, and that
Ah.
I do at $2,000. So it's like the price of three courses basically, but you can get unlimited, which people really like. So I think you do need a higher price point for it to work. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt, man. What about the social media leveraging? Do you leverage the content to post for free on social media, build up your following and drive people to the webinar from there, or how do you view that?
So I'll record little short form videos with little tips. But for the most part, the real value is in the webinar, and you got to come to the webinar, which is like I'm not just going to give away the webinar stuff. I mean, I will give like a minute of it away, but like I said, it's a 90-minute webinar, so it's not like you're going to get 10 minutes of it on social.
And you've gotten it to convert on an evergreen webinar. What software do you use for that? Do you use EverWebinar? What do you do?
Yeah, we use EverWebinar.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, me too. But I haven't been able to make it work with a Facebook ad because it's freaking difficult as all hell, man. So
It is.
what's,
I mean, one
how
of the
would we
big
do
things, the
that?
reasons it works is, I mean, I think you gotta, how much is your product?
2,500.
Oh, that is expensive. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get it work, but I don't know. It I will say it wasn't working that well until I changed it to this $2,000 product price point because now one sale can make up for a bunch of days worth of ad spend. Um, but yeah, I mean, you have the right price point. I don't know. I'd have to kind of look under the hood. Yeah.
What about the retargeting of it? Do you have all that hooked up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it personally. My
Yeah.
ads agency does it. Yeah.
Okay, because that's a major component of it. It's impossible to do it without that. But it's not your specialty. You don't know many details about how they do that under the hood. What you do is the presentation and the education of it.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously I look at the numbers in terms of what our spend is and what our outcome is. But yeah, for the most part, I don't manage the day-to-day of the Facebook ads. Yeah.
What about the Evergreen webinar itself? What's the number one thing you've learned that's worked best for you over time?
Um, I would say try to make it as close to a live webinar as possible. Yeah, because what I try to do is I try to mimic that experience for people. One thing that's worked well for us is having a live chat person in
Yep.
the evergreens so that they can actually respond to people's questions and comments.
Yeah. And do you use the like at 22 minutes and 14 seconds, you got a pop-up that comes up and like it's interactive a little bit. And when the close comes, the assistant in the chat adds the link for the landing page to go check out. You do all that.
Yeah, well, we actually have someone live in the webinars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean for the initial prompting of it and you can automate the at
Oh, yeah,
certain
yeah,
time
yeah.
spans. Yeah. Okay. Do you drive people to a checkout page or to an individual sales page that leads to the checkout page, kind of recapping all the offer?
A landing page with a recap of the offer, and then they can check out from there. Yeah.
Okay, okay. What's your IQ?
Oh, I don't know. I've never tested it.
No shit, eh? I'm surprised. You seem like the kind
Yeah,
of dude that would be in Mensa or whatever.
I have no idea. Yeah, it's not that important to me. I think it's more important just like getting results all day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's the whole point of it at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
You never had that tested, eh? But you had average SAT scores, and then you were able to get perfect. Second try. I mean, it was the second try for
I think it was third try. The second time my score actually went down. So, I mean, I think that's kind of like entrepreneurship. Like it's usually not going to be like there's a lot of you got to go through failure first and then usually you'll have success at some point.
how'd you get through that failure point in terms of building the business? It takes a lot of tenacity, a lot of grit to be able to make it through the painful beginning, what can be a painful beginning. How'd you get through that?
Yeah, I think just not I think you have to be resilient. That's the number one attribute of a successful entrepreneur. If you get too emotional about failure, it can really be a downward spiral. Yeah.
Mhm. What about your parents, man? What did they do?
So my dad's a entrepreneur as well. He owns a hotel and gas, or not hotel, motel and gas station, and he's also a pharmacist. So he was really hardworking. I think that inspired me to work hard.
What about your mom?
So she kind of just helps my dad with the businesses, the gas station, the motel, that kind of thing.
Okay, I got you. What'd you learn from them growing up that helped you succeed as an entrepreneur now?
I think they valued education a lot. So I really value education. That's why I have an education business,
Yeah.
college. I know a lot of people don't value that, which is totally fair. And I think it is getting too expensive. So that's why I try to reduce or eliminate college costs through scholarships for students. But I think that's why I was studying so hard for the SAT and why I eventually started a company.
What was the reason? Because you
Oh,
talk.
the value of education. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, they instilled that in you young, and then look what happened. You made
Yeah.
a career out of it, which is
Yeah.
interesting. No kidding. Huh. So, what's a question that I should be asking you, but I'm not, that if I were to ask you, would provide a lot of value for an entrepreneur?
Um, I mean, I think we covered the main things. We dove into some really good webinar strategies. That's one of the biggest ones. I think we covered Shark Tank and Mark Cuban. I don't have like something you didn't ask me necessarily.
No? If you did, what would it be?
Where can people learn more? Of course, which is, prepexpert.com is where you can find my SAT courses, ACT courses, college consulting. I've got a book they can find. It's called Self-Made Success. It's 48 Secret Strategies to Live Happier, Healthier, and Wealthier. And they can find that on Amazon.
What's the number one secret out of the 48 that's impacted the most people most impactfully?
I'd say a lot of people like the chapter on like the I call it the Dundo philosophy, which is keeping costs super low. So I bootstrapped my business with $900 to make a website, and that was pretty much my only startup cost. After that, we ran on revenue, and we've been profitable ever since. And so instilling that in entrepreneurs that you don't need a whole lot of capital in order to build big businesses. Yeah.
Why the number 48? Is it 48 laws of power that you kind of modeled there, or what? What was your thinking behind that?
I think I just there's like 8 chapters with 6 strategies each. And so it just came out that way. Yeah.
And you don't think visually, you think auditorily primarily. What about kinesthetically? Do you have deep emotions, or is it primarily intellectual, arcane?
I would say it's pretty intellectual. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
surprise
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a test prep guy. I think it's pretty logical, intellectual, stoic type of guy.
What do you do spiritually? Have any spiritual beliefs that have impacted your path?
I was raised Hindu. I don't know that I'm that into spiritualism though. Yeah.
Okay, I read the Bhagavad Gita, and well, at least
You did.
a simplified version of it, an English
Nice.
translation. Yeah,
How'd you like it?
it's beautiful, man. It's stunning in its depth and truth that I perceive it as at the deepest level. Um, yeah, it's affected me quite a bit actually. So, what about you? You said you're not too spiritual these days, but what about growing up? What lessons did you learn from Hinduism?
Um, I mean, the biggest one is I'm vegetarian. I think that's a big thing in Hinduism, that affects my day-to-day life, but I really don't miss meat or anything like that.
Well, that doesn't answer my question. I'm talking about the biggest thing you've taken away from growing up in a Hindu household. What are the most impactful, beneficial beliefs or rituals or things that have been impactful in your life and quality of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think karma is a big thing in Hinduism. So just doing good for others will come back to you. And so I always try to do the right thing because of that.
Hmm. You believe in previous lives and our karma from then affecting now?
Yeah, I would say so.
Hmm.
Reincarnation, I think, is probably true. Yeah.
On this track, how do you balance? Because a big thing that I got from the Gita was not attaching to the result, but but enjoying the experience of it instead of forcing something to happen and focusing on the experience rather than the result. But I've also kind of struggled with balancing that with goal setting as an entrepreneur, visualizing a future, but then not attaching to the necessity of that specifically happening. How do you balance goal setting with not attaching and letting it unfold and flow?
Um, so I think that I'm really attached to the work. I mean, I don't know about everyone or what the philosophy is, but I really just try to do the actions to, um, streamline the work as much as possible. And then whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. And I think that's probably along the lines of what you're
Mm.
talking
Has that always been like that? It just came naturally to you to focus on the experience rather than the result?
about. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, I would say so because I mean I've been in school for so long that it's hard to if you're just attached to the outcome all the time, you're going to get depressed with all the B's and bad grades sometimes, etc.
B's, I'm talking D's, dude. You should have
Yeah,
seen me in school. I did not like it. It was not for me. I was not appreciative of the authority and the rigid structure imposed upon me by other people. Nope, not
yeah.
for me, man. Didn't like it one bit. So I don't miss it. That's interesting, man. So, brother, dude, interesting individual. You are a fascinating individual, that's for sure. Um, what else do you have to add before we kick this off?
Um, I mean, I think I pretty much we covered it. Of course, if people want to find out more from me, connect on social media. My name's Shaan Patel, Shaan. Last name's Patel. And for parents and students listening, check out my website, prepexpert.com.
Right on, man. I like it. Get some plug in, some publicity in there every chance you get, baby. I like it. So, Sean,
Yeah.
dude, absolute pleasure. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your experience and worldview. Interesting to take a peek in your mind. So I appreciate it. And we will keep in touch, my friend.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Kyle. Have a good one.
My pleasure, dude. Bye. All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.